friend asked whether there might be a market for woven rather than printed ties, and I was confused. Aren't all ties that aren't knitted woven? So I raided my husband's closet and took out a bunch of neglected neckwear, like many men he no longer wears or buys ties. First, I took some photos with my iPhone where you can see the weave structure as it would appear to the naked eye. This is an Hermes tie, one of the fancier ones, and has never been actually worn by my husband because it's too cutesy. Sure enough, it does appear to be printed on a plain twill background. You can tell it's twill by the slight diagonals. To be sure, I got out a microscope attachment for my cell phone, and sure enough, you can tell it's definitely printed. Look at how some of the threads are partly blue and partly white. That's a sign of printing. I found the same thing on a red tie with a small pattern that I would have guessed was woven on a jacquard loom. As you can see here, some of the threads are part one color and part another color, a sure sign of a print. But some of the patterns did in fact come from woven structures, like on this color block tie with its plain twill. You can see when you look closely that in fact one color ends and the next begins. Other ties use not just color, but different weave structures to create visual interest, like this black and white one, which uses different versions of what's called satin weave to create contrasting areas. In satin, you have a lot of what are called long floats, which are threads that cover many of the alternating threads without being anchored. And that makes it very smooth and shiny. It also tends to catch on things and can make it fragile. So satin is something you would want in your tie, but not in, say, your sports coat. The striped tie is quite a festival of weave structures and colors. The red is a twill, the varying shades of blue and white are a plain weave. You've got some satin in there on the edges of the stripes, contrasting colors within individual yarns. It's quite a complicated piece of work. Here you have an area of plain weave over under in two subtly different colors next to an area defined by a satin where you can't even see one of the alternating threads. Again, it's the same thing. See that salmon colored is in the satin, and next to it is a satin in the blue, and then the blue plain weave. Finally, we have our vintage tie, which you can see even with the naked eye derives its pattern from the weave structure and the colors of the yarn rather than from printing. And you can see that also when it's magnified 60 times with my nifty cell phone microscope gadget. So to answer the original question, most ties are woven, but being woven doesn't mean your pattern comes from the weave structure. Some are in fact prints. As a weaver and somebody interested in textiles, I think ties are a great place to find interesting woven patterns. But if you're into prestige and really fine silk thread, maybe Hermes is the brand for you, and there you'll find a print. I'm Virginia Postrel. Look for my next book, The Fabric of Civilization, How Textiles Made the World, coming next fall from Basic Books.